This is Phil Bond, a member of the TechAmerica Foundation board and president of the related policy group TechAmerica. Thank you for your time today. We wanted to take this opportunity to brief you on the latest policy partnership that we have between the TechAmerica Foundation and the Obama administration, and then provide you an opportunity to hear directly from the first ever U.S. Chief Technology Officer, Aneesh Chopra. But just by way of background, and on my way to introducing Aneesh, let me point out that we have done a number of efforts like this in partnership with the administration. First was to put together industry and academic thinkers around changes to the procurement system that we did with the CIO officer of the United States. Similarly, then, recommendations on what the U.S. should do in policy and procurement to advance U.S. leadership of cloud computing. We now have a similar effort going on with all 50 states to advise governors, legislatures, and CIOs at the state level on what they can do with the cloud to save money and improve service. And then the latest effort here, assisting and trying to provide some policy and other recommendations to the White House and the Department of Education as they roll out what is known as digital promise. You'll hear more from CTO Aneesh Chopra in just a moment on that. What you know by virtue of the email you received inviting you to this call is that our foundation has pledged to put together a number of academic and business leaders to look at making recommendations for an education research agenda for the new digital promise effort. We're thrilled to have the Chief Scientist of AT&T, Dr. David Belanger, and former NSF director, now affiliated with Purdue University, Dr. Arden Bement, as the co-chairs of that. We have added a couple of other folks in the interim. Molly Corbett-Broad, the president of the American Council on Education, will be joining our commission, as will Julie Evans, the CEO of Project Tomorrow, who is on this call today as well. The opportunity, though, today is to hear directly from Aneesh on behalf of the administration about the digital promise and about this opportunity to be a part of a select group of thought leaders to provide some agenda recommendations to a new digital promise 501c3 entity that is going to be looking at how to do the cutting-edge research that will lead to advanced technologies being used in learning of all kinds, K to gray, so that we might be the innovation headquarters of the world going forward. And now I'm starting to steal Aneesh's thunder, so I got to stop and say that Aneesh Chopra served as the Secretary of Technology in the state of Virginia before joining the administration, where he really has been the central coordinator and really articulator of the Obama administration's vision of what technology can do within government and across the economy. And so we're thrilled, privileged, and very happy to be working with Aneesh Chopra, the first ever Chief Technology Officer of the United States. After we hear from Aneesh, we will go to some question and answers, and we'll just simply ask when we get to that portion that folks identify themselves, and we'll take some time to answer questions. So, Aneesh, please, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Phil, thank you so much. And frankly, I want to thank you for your willingness to bring thought leadership to this very important issue. I'm very excited about the results that will come out of collaboration. And in the spirit of getting things done, looking forward to those ideas that we could take action on.
It's more operational interrelationships, right?
So what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is to provide a few minutes of background and overview about this topic and how the policy environment all comes together. We, in the administration, have published a document called the Strategy for American Innovation, whitehouse.gov/innovation, that outlines more broadly our tech and innovation agenda about how and where we see the role of government. In that framework, we viewed a quantum leap in learning outcomes powered by information technology as one of the policy imperatives for the administration, but that we would achieve that objective through what the President refers to as an all-hands-on-deck approach. In other words, this is very much about grassroots change, public-private partnerships, the role of government as impatient convener, data supplier, nudger, collaborator, but it's not about a top-down single way to rule the world kind of we know the answer and here's what it is approach. And so in that spirit, about a week and a half ago, the president met with a new board of directors that was established by the Congress, actually going back several years in the previous administration, so bipartisan kind of effort to organize a group of individuals thinking about the power of learning technology, emphasizing its impact on outcomes improvement in education. That board, by the way, is a pretty powerful group. It includes the chairman emeritus of Cisco, John Morgridge. It's got the former president of NBC News, Larry Grossman, Irwin Jacobs, one of the founders of Qualcomm, Gilman Louie, who now is a venture capitalist but had been the original founder of InQtel. All kinds of rock stars in the on the board, and it's an amazing group. When you bring great people together, the probability of success escalates, and so we're really pleased that these thoughtful folks have stepped up and are committed to making this happen. What Digital Promise will do is basically address three fundamental challenges. And you could think of these challenges as what I would like to think of as innovation pipeline management, identifying those promising breakthrough technologies that are demonstrating very, very early promise, maybe in one community, maybe in one lab, maybe in one academic center, to then identify what's working and what's not by establishing a better evaluation framework. It takes 17 years in healthcare for evidence-based medicine to actually scale across the country. I don't know the exact analogy in learning, but our presumption is it's in that same kind of very long cycle. So if in the Internet, if search algorithms are optimized every day because of machine learning and they're using algorithms to make better judgments, somewhere between that very day and 10, 20 years is perhaps the right balance of identifying what works and what doesn't. And so Digital Promise will engage on those issues. And then obviously you got to find a way to scale what works. So what is the current market for these learning technologies? We got 14,000 school districts. Procurement processes may or may not be seen as being all that helpful or innovation friendly. And so what we're trying to do is think of these three issues. Now, the board, of course, to be careful, is independent of the government. We are supporting them with startup capital, but the board will be essentially on its own. So this is less about telling the board what to do and more finding creative ways to support the board to achieve its mission objectives. But two related efforts came out of the board announcement that give us a vehicle into this conversation. One of them was the launch of a new League of Innovative Schools. That is a number of school districts around the country who wish to join hands with Digital Promise to be that kind of test bed, clinical trials, early adopter of learning technologies to basically be smart buyers. You want to picture what the future is going to look like? It might very well happen in these early adopting communities. How do we support those early adopting communities, giving them the tools they need to aggregate demand and to signal to the market the requirements of the future? We're investing in research and development, the National Science Foundation, DARPA, other areas. So how might our R&D enterprise continue to push the envelope here? And we're harnessing information in new and creative ways. Open education data, a report by the Council of Economic Advisors that we issued the day we released the report talked about this sort of information gap and the challenges this has made on the difficulties, I should say, for the entrepreneurial ecosystem to demonstrate new products and services and to take them to market and scale. So those are the big picture items. So indulge me just a few more minutes. I have some specific topics that might be the first shot as to what we think you all might do to bring value to the discussion. all subject to your input and obviously a dialogue we can have, but let me just do my best. I see three categories where this group can be very, very helpful. The first of those categories is research and development. The second of those categories is in open data. And the third of those categories is establishing a learning productivity ecosystem. So let me take each of those three. On the issue of research and development, one of the things that we've been able to do is the President spoke about the idea of digital tutors, and he's spoken about the idea of online courses that improve the more students use them. Both of those concepts, a digital tutor and online courses that improve, basically speak to technological innovation, algorithms, identifying personalized instruction. The question here is, we've seen some early evidence of success, namely in the Navy. They've literally taken their sysadmins, the IT help desk equivalents in the Navy, and they trained high school graduates, not a college graduate, high school graduates, and putting them through a 16-week course. They have demonstrated that a digital tutor has helped those high school graduates outperform 7-year Navy sysadmins. I don't know to what extent, as we look to sort of test this out further, whether the companies in the TechAmerica Foundation, they might have their own sysadmin training programs that might also basically pile into this concept of a digital tutor that gets high school dropouts, rural Americans, others, to basically connect into the technology job market using these relatively fast learning methodologies. How might you help to dig into that issue of research and development with a use case of next generation sysadmins getting to work? We actually may be funding an initiative here. It's not guaranteed yet, but we might getting returning military veterans to take on this kind of role to connect them to technology jobs. So anyway, that's bucket number one. Help us think about algorithms for machine learning, prizes and challenges in that area, by the way, as well as building up these digital tutors to get high school graduates trained and maybe even offering jobs to some of those graduates using the digital tutor. The second category of open data is pretty self-evident. What information might we release or nudge out of the industry that would help the foundation think about products and services, consuming that data, reaching commercial scale with products and services? We've seen this work in health, in manufacturing, and other domains. We'd love to see open data-fueled products and services make their way into the education market. And last, but certainly not least, and perhaps most relevant from a tech crowd, how do we actually achieve a culture of learning productivity? If it takes a school district X months to teach a concept, how do we reduce the amount of time it takes to teach that concept and actually increase the number of folks that succeed learning that concept at the same time? Here we've got lots of barriers and challenges. How do we think about seat time, moving off of a seat time culture to a learn as you go mastery as opposed to seat time? How does cloud computing fit into this? Mobile technologies, Wi-Fi in the classroom, to help us build that infrastructure to support a more productive learning system. I'm sure there's lots of barriers to adopting these learning technologies and the infrastructure that supports them, and so you're in a great position to inform us of those issues. Those are just my first thoughts. Phil, I will happily be quiet and take questions or thoughts. But again, thank you in advance for the great work you'll do to help us tackle these or related issues.
Thank you, Aneesh, and let's move then to folks who may have some questions. Again, if you would identify yourself and your affiliation and any questions you may have for Aneesh, and then I'll come back after the Q&A to talk a little bit about deadlines, time frame, and some other things. But how about questions?
I have a question. This is Kamsi McAdams. I'm the STEM director for DC Public Schools, and prior to that I taught in New York City and Oakland for 10 years and was at the National Science Foundation for a fellowship. I just have a question around the last part, the learning systems ecosystem, the learning productivity ecosystem. And I think we hear a lot about innovative technologies and innovative ways to change the structure of the classroom from being sort of a stage on the stage to being more facilitated small groups or individual learning. But I think a big lift is in the professional development of teachers, and I just wonder whether anybody's thinking about specifically how do we address not the new training of teachers of the pre-service, but the in-service training of teachers.
So I come to this question with two thoughts. Obviously, thought number one is it is really important for us to support teachers in this environment. But at the same time, it's equally a challenge for our software developers to design products and services that are as easy as FaceTime video chatting or, Facebook, news posts or what have you, so that while I appreciate complexity often requires training, I'm struck by how many new capabilities actually are as simple as rolling them out without much effort. And I would think we would want equal parts support for training, but also demystifying and decomplexifying some of the applications. I'll just give you one example. One of the pieces of infrastructure for learning productivity is an effort we're doing called Learning Registry, which would allow teachers to find all publicly funded content that they could use in developing their own course materials. Today, it's like a pain in the neck.
Right.
But in the future, if you literally go on like a search engine and said, hey, I'm teaching 5th grade pre-algebra, I'm in the proportions and fractions section, what videos help convey this issue?
Right. Are you guys working at all? I mean, is anybody working with MIT Blossoms? MIT Blossoms has some pretty amazing stuff in terms of it stands for Blended Learning Solutions for Online Math and Science or something like that. We work with them in DC, and they're an amazing group where they exactly have videos that are searchable.
Well, all to the point is, and this is a great example of recommendations that TechAmerica might offer, which is in the spirit of how standards are scaled in the United States. This is a voluntary, industry-led effort. If the TechAmerica Foundation were to say, here are 3 standards for tagging content and making them searchable and findable so that they can be reused, that would be phenomenal input. Maybe it's the MIT thing, maybe it's some other thing, maybe Google's doing something, whatever. This would be a topic area of infrastructure for learning productivity where you surface the standards that exist or tweaks that can be done in relatively short order to surface. But again, I'm giving you that particular use case, again, because teachers, if you could literally drag and drop the course materials in developing your quote-unquote playlist for your STEM course, you said you do STEM in DC, how easy is it for a teacher today to design a STEM course? It's a pain in the neck.
Yep.
If we literally had, but how hard is it to do a playlist in iTunes?
Yeah, exactly.
If I could do a chapter from Pearson Learning combined with this NASA thing, combined with this MIT thing, combined with this other video, with this other random exam, and stitch that all together into a 3-month course module, imagine if it was easy as drag and drop. That's what your report to me can help make happen. Okay. Other questions?
Hi.
Jeannie Webb. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeannie.
This is Jeannie Weber. I'm the director of the Suffolk Regional Information Center with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. I'm like the CIO for Suffolk County for the public K-12 school districts. My background is also I'm an IT engineer, and I also sit on the New York State Broadband Technology Committee. Two thoughts relative to the discussion you were just having is there's another resource called Thinkfinity that was funded by the Verizon Foundation, and which is about to be sunsetted. And one thought is Thinkfinity actually is the basic foundation for the public repository that you were just referring to. That might be something that might be worth investigating to see if it's possible to save it, because it is composed entirely of materials that are free to all teachers. It is currently used nationally, some states more than others. New York happens to be one of the gold standard states for it, and certainly we have resources that we could connect with otherwise to provide additional information. But it is exactly the foundation for what you're describing, is that free repository that teachers can go to. So I would just wanted to throw that out there as a potential resource.
Can I just make one observation? And this may come across negative, so don't take it as such. Mm-hmm. We often separate out nouns from verbs. The nouns in this space are overwhelming. There are dozens of, quote, repositories that store data for folks to use. It's overwhelming. What's missing is the verb. How do I find the stuff that I need? I don't care if it's in Thinkfinity's website or Timbuktu website or John Doe website or what have you. So the real question is, are there common metadata standards that learning material would be tagged in so that they can be searchable and found?
Within Thinkfinity, there actually are.
No, I'm not trying to push back. I'm just suggesting, and again, we don't have to solve it on this call. There are thousands of people trying to come up with these standards. The thing you guys could do that would be productive and helpful is just weigh in on whether or not there are consensus standards that could be brought to market and scaled. I will tell you that the Gates Foundation has funded Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo to specifically do this, to create common metadata tags and schema, and that may be different than what you saw happening in Verizon. So there's so many of these activities happening, overwhelmingly built in the private sector. It would be nice if someone brought those folks together to say, let's get these things going, and then we can learn it and figure out ways to bring those to scale. So again, I'm not suggesting one is better than the other. I'm just pointing out the obvious. Lots of folks putting lots of money into it, and it's definitely an exciting and important area.
This is Judy Converso from Florida, and with CSC. And one of the questions I have, or at least an observation, back in the 1990s, there was an initiative called Florida School Year 2000. Were you familiar with it at all?
Not that specifically, but tell me what about it that you want to reference.
Okay. We were involved in that as a field site. There were 9 collaborating school districts in the state of Florida, and it was led by Florida State University, and that's how I got involved over at Florida State. But this state initiative was to reform education in the state of Florida, technology-driven, systems approach, tying in all the aspects of a school system. It was K-12 primarily, although it did have implications because of the benefits to colleges and universities, military, communities, and the workforce, industry and business and industry. What we found out in that was that a systems approach was key, taking incremental steps and phasing it to like the generations. This is the first generation of youth. This is the next generation, so that people are progressing through it. And then we also found that the whole change management piece was totally the foundation of it, because you're getting people to do something differently from what they're used to, whether they're an end user, whether they're a supplier or a provider or whatever it may be. The key, what I'm saying, based on the lessons learned from that, is that when you look at the students that you're going to be looking at, one of the target audiences that already has been created for you is in the state of Florida, and I know Georgia has it, and I don't know what other states. But Florida now has a statute where students must have one online course before they graduate with a degree from high school. And that is in preparation to go into business, to go into military, or go into college and universities. So that when you talk about the R&D, you already have a group that's going to be mandated to take an online course. Now, they're only saying one course, but it's at least a start with Florida, and I know Georgia, and again, I don't know what other states have it. But that may be a good target audience to start with. The other comment I would have is the standards. I really like the standards because I'm very much into this whole systems approach in the instructional design, instructional systems design. And when you look at the NCTM, the National Math Standards, that's driving a lot of the math curriculum in many of the states. If the math can have those kinds of standards, then how do you link it with the technology, delivery? I mean, it's obviously the content is the key. The means to which you deliver it is not the focus, and I agree with you. There's got to be the the process, the results that you want to look at over process and means. So therefore, if you're looking at in those terms, what are the standards? We already have standards that are at a national level with math. And I believe when I left the university full-time, they were dealing with ones for, it was either reading or writing that they were doing. So one of the things I would question is that you already have some mechanisms in place for targeted audiences or processes.
I'm trying to think of how best to respond. It's very important to acknowledge we are not going to be changing local school districts' behaviors from Washington. Schools are managed and governed from the grassroots in our country. So we're not really trying to say we want to change the way Tennessee does business relative to Florida. That's for Tennessee to decide and for people within the state, different communities. What we're trying to do is, in the case of League of Innovative Schools, there may very well be a number of school districts in Florida who want to voluntarily join this group to allow for promising innovations to come to market. We do not want to impose this on anybody. We want to naturally evolve those who wish to volunteer by raising their hands. But that'll be a judgment that the local school districts will make. And your point about Florida law requiring an online course is obviously very interesting. We are not here to take policy opinions about whether that's good or bad and people should or shouldn't do that. We're trying to build the evidence base on what's working and what's not, and that's how digital, when I say we, Digital Promise is going to take on that responsibility as a 501c3. From the federal government standpoint, the R&D I was referring to is where the National Science Foundation should invest. DARPA has been investing in this area. We've called for a new ARPA for education, which is a DARPA focused on educational issues. What should the research agenda be in that area? That's what I meant by R&D. And then your final point about standards, there's two categories of standards. There's what do school districts adopt to be the definition of what constitutes a student that has achieved mastery in math, and that's literally these Common Core concepts, which a lot of the states have adopted. And then there are these technical standards, which is, like in this example, an assessment data standard, which is how do I convey that my student has mastered those particular whatever those concepts may be, the idea of gravity and fractions and proportions and all the things that you'd have to demonstrate mastery on, and how do I communicate that this child has mastered those subjects in a manner that facilitates more learning outcome opportunities, whether it be new products, software, or teachers complemented by homework assignments that are captured in a digital form. How do those assessment standards allow for other products and services to come to market? So that's how we were thinking about the questions that you posed. Again, we have to solve all that on this call, but that's the philosophy behind it. Would certainly welcome folks to dig into these issues as appropriate.
Hi, this is Kate Harkin from eTech Ohio. We're the state agency kind of focused on the role of advancing education through the use of technology. And one suggestion that I would like to put out there for you as you're kind of moving forward in design is oftentimes kind of research opportunities and the like are directed at perhaps change of teacher pedagogy in the classroom, the way that they're delivering content. And one thing that I've kind of seen over the course of time with the role of technology is that we're not focusing really on the learner enough as being the kind of action researcher in the overall design of how we move forward. And some of the things that you're talking about, especially the online courses that improve through use, the digital tutor, the mashup of digital content as a way to communicate and engage with, content in any area in a new and different way. We're thinking about what the teacher might do for the student, but, really what can the student do differently should also be somewhere an active dialogue in as you move forward would be a suggestion that I would have. So it's not
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I want to be, maybe I've missed. You and the TechAmerica Foundation community are stepping up to the plate and submitting your thoughts on a whole range of issues. I think it'd be phenomenal if instead of saying, hey, you should look into this, I might flip it back and say, hey, you guys, when you issue this report back to me, might include a chapter on student-directed learning. And I would say, hallelujah, and that sounds great. So this call is essentially a dialogue about what work you all might do, not on this call, but over the coming weeks and months, to sort of submit your views to the country as to how we can move this agenda forward. I would love there to be a student-directed learning component, and where you think the barriers are for that, why that's not happening today, where you think the opportunities might be, and what role you think Digital Promise could play and or the administration and the tools that we've outlined in support of that vision. I think that's exactly what this call is about, and would put it right back on you to say, would you be open to engaging with your peers on this phone call under Phil's leadership and the chairs that he mentioned to think about putting some pen to paper on those areas? I would say welcome that with open arms.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hi, Aneesh. This is Julie Evans from Project Tomorrow. Thanks so much for taking the time with us today. As a member of the Commission, I'm particularly interested in those three categories that you had, the R&D, the open data, and the learning productivity ecosystem, and particularly under the R&D. Now, you gave us a couple examples. You gave
Hello, go ahead, Julie. I think you're back.
I'm back. I was talking about the R&D part of it, Aneesh. And the digital tutors I'm very familiar with. Online courses, of course, we're familiar with that. We're also spending a lot of time talking about adaptive software right now. I wondered if you had, and we are obviously, from a TechAmerica standpoint, going to be able to tap into our companies in terms of some of the technology innovations they have that could be transportable over to the learning environment. I was wondering if you had any other examples from the government sector. I love the digital tutor component in the Navy and wondered if you had any other examples of some innovative technologies in the government sector that we could possibly tap into as well.
Well, the reality is there has not been much federal funding for breakthroughs in learning technologies because this is an area in the report we issued where there's been very, very limited R&D funding. That's in part what compelled the President to prioritize more R&D funding in this area and the idea of an ARPA for education. Having said that, I would make two observations. Observation number one, we do have a number of National Science Foundation grant recipients in a micro way experimenting in their lab and in their universities with, basically algorithms for what to produce in front of a child based on if they are more of a learner in this modality versus that modality, if they're more, kind of the active ingredients that could inform it.
Sure.
So one thing we could do and should do, and maybe this report could be helpful in helping to sift through this, is we might provide for you kind of a summary of the research we've funded to date in these areas to kind of get your input about what you think is particularly exciting or not. DARPA tends to be they take an idea from concept to real results. That's why Twitter's a great story, because it was actually designed that way. Whereas on the NSF side, we fund kind of the professor's kind of theories, and it doesn't actually have a specific commercialization data point. The second thing I would make, though, is we have lots of government-funded learning material. That's what I was describing the learning registry about, and how we're trying to make that information a resource that folks could use when building their own, commercial products and services. So it's less about what have we learned in the government as opposed to what resources has the government already funded that can be reused by developers to get into this a bit further. But no, I would argue this is an industry that's on the early days of true research and development funding. And unfortunately, because of the buying cycle, what you normally see is great sales for hardware, crappy sales in software. And I don't mean that to be too disrespectful, but that's just kind of the nature of the buying system. So we don't have the kind of, equivalent of enterprise resource planning software environment for the for the K-12 environment, to build curriculum, to connect with teachers, to connect with students, to integrate other supplemental learning materials. There isn't that equivalent of an ERP-like platform in education. And of course, someone's going to get on the phone and say, "No, I have one. I make it. I sell it," and that may be true, but none of them that have reached the kind of scale you'd like to see, or that we've seen in other sectors of the U.S. economy.
I think that's a great idea, though, to look at the DARPA side of things and see what we might be able to possibly mine from them as well.
Yes. So I'll take as a to-do, Phil, for the group, as much as we can on making our research investments transparent so folks can kind of play around in that material.
Great. That would be a really good several starting points. I want to observe for the group on the phone, too, that another window into the world that this last question was just asking about, there are a lot of companies out there providing very technology-based learning capabilities for the services and for the Veterans Administration and others that, to Aneesh's point, have not reached scale yet, but might give us some insight into best-of-breed and approaches to creating productivity ecosystems within some of the smaller agencies and sub-agencies. So in our ecosystem here at the TechAmerica Foundation, we know those companies, so we can bring some of them and say, tell us what you're doing in some of the smaller programs that you think is cutting edge, or what questions have you uncovered that we really need to research better so that we end up with better learning. Similarly, in corporate learning systems, they've pushed the envelope in all kinds of ways in their training and learning systems. So we can pull on all these strings and make some recommendations in the areas that Aneesh has outlined here for the Digital Promise Board going forward. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll need to wrap up.
This is John Sonnenberg from School Technology Services. ERP was written down by Eric Willard here. I was going to have him address that real quick, but I also, my background, I was Director of e-learning for the state of Illinois and Director of the Illinois Virtual Schools, and I also worked extensively with the largest tutoring service for the DoD. I can't stress enough the importance of spinning off from the government service. I'm really glad to hear that. But I'll let Eric talk about ERP.
Hi, again, thank you, John. Eric Willard, CTO of what's considered in Illinois a large school district at 21,000 students. When I lived in Texas, that would have been medium. They're small. It's all about perspective. I will say this. I had written ERP down early in this conversation because in maybe 10, 12 years ago, we began a process looking for an ERP in the education market. There was front end, back. By the way, I had 20 years of corporate training and development before I came into the education marketplace with public ed. So as a corporate trainer at Digital Equipment, Wang Labs, Exxon, other large companies, one of our frustrations was job preparedness of people coming into the workforce and how much we had to spend of corporate training money, what we called fixing people. And that's when I decided to come into public education. So this is my third school district as CTO, and I spent 9 years as a consultant going around the country working with school districts all over on building technology plans and developing strategies to use technology for innovation. With that said, one of the things that I encountered in the year 2000, mid to late 2000, early 2001, was a company in India who was the only company I had found in the world that had a true ERP system with all of the administrative side of things and the instructional side. They wanted to form a U.S. division, which they asked me to be president and CEO of. I agreed to that. We started the company. It was funded in India by a venture capitalist, the Carlyle Group. We needed to get matching funding. That was all set up through GE Electric. And the meeting was taking place in New York City on September 11th of 2001, and the Carlyle Group had much larger problems to divest over $1 billion worth of investment in the Bin Laden construction company. So my whole little deal went away. The purpose of that story is, here it is 20 years or 10 years, 12 years later, and nothing still exists for a full ERP system in education. So we are left to try and find ways to build data warehouses and other methods in schools to bring our silos of data together. And I don't have anything to offer in R&D or in open data, because I'm hoping to find people who can support school districts like mine. We have, in my current district, built the entire infrastructure we need. I've been presenting to our board meeting 4 meetings in a row now on where we stand with technology. We are poised for greatness is what I use for the slogan. We have everything ready with all our infrastructure we need to do high-speed anything and everything, and have built partnerships in a lot of areas. But what's missing is the research behind where do we go next. I've built the infrastructure. Nobody's questioned that. We're ready to allow kids to bring their own devices to school. We're trying to work on the programs like Comcast is offering with their Internet Essentials, where kids of poverty level will be allowed to purchase computers through Comcast. And we're really trying to get Comcast to modify the program that lets school districts participate in that to make sure there's wireless devices in those units they're selling. And so I am looking for this group or this program to say, hey, Eric, we want a place where we can try this stuff out that's got all the infrastructure built, willing communities, willing board, willing district leadership to try these things out, and we're ready. I have done some of these programs back in a school district with Sears as a partner when they had Prodigy, if you remember that far back, along with IBM, who donated computers for 2 full classrooms where every student had a computer at home in 1991. And so we've been working these issues, and unfortunately, we haven't got a solution yet, but we're close. I'm looking for the research behind some of this so I can justify moving forward with my board. I'm hoping that's where you're going with all this.
Okay. Well, good to hear, and thank you for the background there. Let me, in the interest of time, move toward some closing thoughts for folks and answer some of the questions that we're getting online about next steps and so forth. And I need to start all of that by thanking Aneesh for taking his time today and one of the world's busiest jobs to talk with us all here today. Obviously, there is a lot to do. Aneesh has done us a favor of outlining some of the areas that we might look at for categories. A lot to learn about learning, and then identify R&D opportunities, data opportunities, the ecosystem opportunities, and so forth. So here's where we're going through the TechAmerica Foundation. We do want to bring a private sector voice and view to this, leaning on a lot of the leading technology and training companies to be a part of this, and people experienced like the former NSF director, bringing that research background to the table. We also want to have nonprofits involved. As you know from the email you would have received for this call, we do have an application process online. We have about 10 days left to receive nominations, and urge folks to go to the website and nominate the appropriate person from your organization. And then our TechAmerica Foundation board will review those and make selections. We hope to have somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 commissioners all told, each allowed to appoint a deputy to help them with their work. But beyond that, the dynamics get very difficult for the group to move together toward recommendations. So you have a feel for kind of the size and timing. There is, as we do this on a project basis through the TechAmerica Foundation, there is a cost to the companies providing to help defray the cost of the entire effort, and that's either $3K or $5K, depending on size of company. Nonprofits, again, will be considered for no-cost participation from among the different nominees. Our time frame would be to try to get this done very early in the coming year, working through the winter months. And our game plan, as Aneesh and I have talked about, would be to get our group together, begin to formulate some concepts that we want to focus on, have a midterm meeting, again, with Aneesh to compare our initial thoughts and kind of structure of those thoughts to see how that fits with what the administration would like to see, to make sure that we're on the same page. Then we would proceed to a final report and set of recommendations, again, then coordinating on the back end as a delivery report with the administration to unveil those and deliver them to Aneesh as CTO, and through him to the Digital Promise Board. So that is the general time frame and the level of partnership that the administration will have in this private sector opportunity to really provide a, as we call it, a real agenda, recommendations for education and advancement of learning, a real agenda for the Digital Promise effort as it just begins. The administration and Digital Promise will be out talking to many companies about participating financially in the funding and some of the research that Digital Promise ultimately will do. Our mission is to try to put together that initial agenda for them to consider. So we hope that all of those on the call and others will nominate folks from their companies or their organizations to participate, and then we will be back to each of the nominees after considering those with the TechAmerica Foundation board. So with that, let me thank you for your time and attention and questions today. You have the email address of Matthew Kazmierzak, Executive Director of the TechAmerica Foundation. If you have follow-up specific questions or points of inquiry, you can follow up with him. And then otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you show up in the nominations and moving forward in this great policy partnership with the Obama administration. Thank you all for being on the call today.
Thanks, Bill.